You will have to slightly bear with us because we're hoping to be joined by Yaryna Chornohuz, who is an extremely brilliant young poet who is serving with the Ukrainian army at this moment. And we're hoping to start the panel with her reading a poem. I don't think she's logged in as yet, but hopefully we'll hear from her. If not, you'll have to tolerate me reading this poem. Just have to put up with that. But in the meantime, let me introduce the other panelists. So we have Nomi Bar-Yaacov, an extremely eminent, award-winning international peace negotiator and associate fellow at the Geneva Center for Security Policy. She's often on television commentating on latest political events with much sageness, I would say. And then we have Khalid Albaih, who is a political cartoonist, Sudanese, but now based in Oslo and...
Between Doha and Oslo, yes.
Doha and Oslo. Mm-hmm. So, any sign of Yaryna? I don't think so. Okay. Now, what I'm going to ask is, for 2 minutes of your lives, if you could put down your mobile phones and don't look at your laptops. I know it's not the poet doing this, but I'm going to do it because I think it's a tremendous poem. I have had a glass of champagne and 6 coffees. I don't know whether it's going to work. And if I make a hash of it, just bear with me. But this is worth listening to. It'll take 2 minutes. And I'm as nervous as if I was giving a best man speech. A spot too red. Darkness, drunkenness, and each one of us goes alone in the dark, even though there's no breathing room here. Just shoulders, just bodies, in the dark. We each walk alone until it occurs to each of us that there was never any point in looking for support. All shoulders are too weak for the heart that beats in you, for the voice that speaks in you of a love that we've already forgotten to seek, for a love that became a sign, love of your own, love for its own sake. They don't believe in it, although in this world it's more like a sun than anything else. And the world says with its male voice, you're a spot that's too red on a canvas, that's too greyish white, which makes the composition messy, so sloppily saturated in red when everything around demands the usual black, overcoming the revolting weakness of the female body, stepping over fallen trees, your skin wrapped in several rolls of ballistic nylon, feeling the protection of the silent iron in your hands. We each feel 2 things, darkness, drunkenness. We each go alone in the dark. Support is unnecessary. Support beats inside you and has a voice. All shoulders are too weak to support a single heart. Strong words are always too weak. A strong body is mortal. A voice won't die out if it knows how to be. There's a soldier girl in every woman who will have to pass through the dark alone. And all help is unnecessary, and all shoulders are redundant, and all the burden is for 2 hands alone, and all loves are lived and left, and all the solitude is yours. And the world's whole night is like one sun for one life. Powerful stuff.
Very powerful.
So, Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo, Kashmir, the list of the world's major conflicts seems to be getting longer by the week. Nomi, are such conflicts more prevalent now than in previous decades or eras, excepting periods of all-out world war? If so, why is this the case? Has warfare, as The Guardian has recently suggested, become increasingly normalized internationally and the restraints of the global diplomatic system weakened?
Gosh, Thank you very much, first and foremost, for having me here, Achilles and the Art for Tomorrow team. The nature and scope of war has certainly changed. It's no longer the same. Any individual can look up on the internet how to make a bomb, whether it's a chemical weapon, a biological weapon, even nuclear materials. You can buy the ingredients for most of those in the chemist, and you don't even need, a license. There are plenty of dual-use materials, like chlorine, for example, absolutely lethal. There is a crisis in leadership in the world, and that crisis is extremely detrimental to the state of the world. So again, where you have crisis in leadership, it really is up to the communities to change, but to force the change. But that requires some work, and we're seeing... Can I just ask absolutely.
You, is that crisis of leadership a profoundly different situation from 20, 30 years ago?
Yes, absolutely.
How would you characterize that crisis then?
Well, I would say that there are countries that bragged about being the leading democracies in the world that are acting in an autocratic fashion. Maybe they will be the leading autocracies in the world, but they're certainly not democracies. So I think, yes, there has definitely been a very serious change in the last year, and not only one country. I mean, you see it sort of, there's populism, it's become, due to the irresponsible role of the mega techs, it has become fashionable to be rebellious and anti-democratic. So it's a massive threat to democracy and the values of democracy as we know them. And I certainly would say we're in a much worse place today than we were 20 years ago, without a shadow of doubt.
Khalid, what do you feel about this? You're a little bit younger, but do you, and I suppose you look at the newspaper, well, maybe you don't look at the newspapers every morning, you're probably like me and try to avoid it, but you're aware of the news, you're aware of the tumult in the world. Does this feel to you, you're from Sudan, does this feel a very profoundly different situation?
Yes, absolutely. This is a time, I think, where people like me, artists, activists, that now feel like we're in a different world because there's no safe space. Before, if you have issues with your dictator, as most political cartoonists do in the global south or the global majority, it's, you always have countries that said, we support freedom of expression, we support freedom of speech, we support democracy, that, we can host you and you can continue your work. Now this does not exist, or as we can see with all the deportations that are happening and so on. So for people like me, this is a very different time, actually. And for a lot of the organizations that work with artists and writers at risk, this is a very peculiar time, absolutely.
Okay. Now I was going to ask the question of Yaryna, but regrettably and very sadly she's not here, but I can ask you guys. Over the centuries, artists, writers, photographers, and filmmakers have forged powerful depictions of the madness and horror of war. Wilfred Owen's First World War poems, Picasso's 1937 painting Guernica, Joseph Heller's 1961 novel Catch-22 are just three famous examples. But we now live in an age of 24-hour online news coverage, YouTube videos, and social media posts. Have these desensitized our horror of war? Has drone footage turned war into a computer game? Has it become more difficult for the individual artists, has it become more difficult for the individual artist to make an impact? Nomi, what do you think?
I think that social media are playing by and large a very negative role due to lack of regulation. And I think that's a very, very serious issue, and I think they're certainly adding aid to the very disturbed minds of the young. I think they are playing shooting games from a very young age, and that's and that has become.
You're talking about the gaming culture.
Gaming culture, the gaming. I mean, you were talking about short videos, but it's also the attention span. But just, it's all about how many people or aliens or whatever you kill. I mean, so basically the culture of the gaming and the videos is extremely violent and extremely detrimental. So, whether you've got drones, and then the more sophisticated the games get and the more up to date they are, it just shows how the change in warfare has become much more dangerous today. Speaking earlier about the weapons of mass destruction, but there are also, of course, destructive drones that almost anyone can build, in their own backyard or in a tunnel, or there's sort of. So that's, I think, that's a very very serious issue. So I think it's become more complex, and it really boils down to the role of international law, international courts, and it should be banned. It's as simple as that.
Okay, well, we'll get back to that. But what do you feel about the issue of desensitization? I don't know whether someone like you would feel it, because, I look at YouTube videos of the war in Ukraine, and then I suddenly think, well, these are human beings being killed here. These little explosions on the screen, and I feel almost sort of quite ashamed that I myself become desensitized. But what do you feel in this situation?
I'm from a generation that grew up with the internet. And we went from having, one channel that's mostly kind of, propaganda news, or this is what the government wants you to see, to the openness of the internet, which later on, of course, became kind of like the opposite of what it was supposed to do. And the motto, I think, of journalism, or some journalists, is if it doesn't bleed, right? It doesn't lead, which means like if it's not violent, then it's not going to sell. Kind of moved on to the internet, and now it's platforms kind of give way to that, give way to the bad news, and which later turned into violence and fake news and so on and so on. It's just you have so many kind of outlets that are promoting that. And the sad thing as well with the whole concept of journalism as well is it's because fake news is free and proper journalism is behind paywalls, right? So this is what you're mostly, this is what you get. And especially for people like us, right, in the global south or whatever. So it's very complicated. And of course it's not drone footage that made it look like, it's a war zone. It's actually drone rockets also, that these kids that were playing video games are now just playing video games with real people's lives. And this is what you see in the war in Gaza. It's all drones, right? Like,
absolutely.
And this is where we are right now. So it did open the floodgates to the change in warfare itself, and for me as an artist, this was my only way. The internet actually gave me the space to be here, and gave me the space to get in past these borders that I would regularly need a visa to go through, right? And I got to start conversations with a lot of people, and I got to have my work show in places that I would never show. But now that internet is gone, so that only access is gone, and it's ruled by algorithms that sadly don't put that first.
No, the algorithms, just to add on to what Khalid said, the algorithms make it worse because the algorithms are promoting the violence. That once you start a game or you watch something on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, and there is violence in it, they will promote it, and that's what your child or whoever is playing the game will get. So of course, but to answer your question about desensitizing, of course there's a because that's become prevalent. That's what young people do. They shoot on the computer. So then it's, it's quote unquote normal for them.
I sort of stopped you, but you were beginning to talk about a possible, not solution, but a way to respond to it in terms of international relations and diplomatic relations. So could you explain?
No, I think it should be banned. I think there should be an international treaty. There's a European treaty. With AI, everything is fragmented. You don't have one international treaty that regulates what the moguls can and cannot do. And that's really where you need to strive for. And it's beyond urgent. I would say that that's the number one priority, because in terms of drawing a line under this madness that has become acceptable. It is acceptable for any child of almost any age to hold a gun on a screen. Holding a gun on the screen will then, of course, naturally want them to pick up a gun and fight. And what are they fighting for? They don't really know. And that makes it, of course, that you have mercenaries, it's much easier for those evil leaders with an agenda to recruit. So,
No.
So the only way to deal with it is to have every country legislate, every community legislate, but also you need one overall treaty.
I also think as a viewer, I mean, you watch a video of, a child, just half of it is gone, and then you watch a building blow up, and then you watch a TikTok about food, right? So it's about food or fashion. It's like all these things that just makes other things look normal. Like
exactly.
You can't go from half a child to a video about food and then go on with your day. That's not normal. That's not supposed to be normal. And I think this is the main issue, that it became normal for us. I mean, now, today, I was just talking to a friend of mine. I woke up today with the news about, there was an earthquake in Cairo. My parents are now refugees in Cairo after the war in Sudan. Half an hour later, we get news about one of our most famous young singers dying of a heart attack because of the stress of the war. And then I go to lunch. Right? It's just, it's something that is...
How can this be combated as an individual? How do you combat that?
You don't. I really don't know. I really don't know. I mean, this is it's such a position that, and this is me. I'm very privileged. I'm here right now. I'm not feeling any of this.
Is it an extension almost of the concept of the banality of evil?
Well, how to combat it, I think there is a role for every individual to play in how they combat it. It's first to acknowledge that this is happening. Once you acknowledge that this is happening, you're part of it. You're allowing it to happen unless you do something about it. And I think everyone, when they get up in the morning, brush their teeth, and hopefully meditate for a few minutes, should be thinking about what can I do within my skills, within my community, within my profession to reverse that? Because as I said at the opening, the change will come from the community. And it will come eventually, but it takes work. It takes individual work, and it takes community work, and it takes collective work.
What about the role of regulation, though? Is that possible at a time when the diplomatic system is severely weakened, if not near the point of collapse?
Well, there'll be a new diplomatic system. So you need to give the countries from the global south, and you've got BRICS, and you've got the old institutions, and you need new institutions, but you can't get rid of all the old institutions. Okay. So you basically need, for example, the Security Council is completely dysfunctional. That's an understatement. It's a disaster. So you need to reform the Security Council. The UN has zero credibility because the Security Council was formed in 1945. We're not in 1945 anymore. So you need to look at the old institutions and see how you can reform them, and you need to build new democratic institutions. For example, as Achilles' panel at the Delphi Forum highlighted, it's time to get a fourth pillar of democracy. You have the legislature and the executive and the judiciary with all of their problems, but it's time to create a serious citizens' assembly. It's time to give the power back to the people. And that's a process on all levels. It's an individual and a collective effort and a global effort. And it's really high time to do that.
You're tremendous positives, but this is at the time when autocracy is getting more and more power in more and more countries, and it's an incredibly challenging moment, isn't it?
But it's
the only way to combat the autocracy is to take responsibility now, and not to be sort of like complacent. They've just deported this innocent person to El Salvador, and they're not going to send them back. Oh, really? Oh, that's okay. No, everyone has to take action. It's not okay, because if you want to fight the trend towards autocracy at present, and the trend, as I said, we're not in the same place as we were 10, 20 years ago, then we each have an individual responsibility, whether it's in the arts, whether it's in music, whether it's in IT, whatever your skills are, you, every individual, we have a responsibility to do our bit, and that's where the change will come from.
Khalid, you were going to say something?
No, I was just saying also, I mean, our role as artists is to innovate. So we have a huge take in this. We are the people that are supposed to invent and imagine a better future, and we're supposed to give them that chance, right? We're not supposed to be locked in a place talking about art.
Talking of that, let's have a look at some of your work.
I don't know if this is, yeah, there we go. Oh, there you go. So
Okay.
this is about exactly what you were talking about, is that we cannot see what's going on in the world today and just pass by it and just give it a like or give it a share and move on. Like, this is all we can do. There's more to do, and it depends, exactly as you said, on each one of us and what they can do with their own skills.
And that's a great image of desensitization, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is something that's obviously very close to me. I mean, this is about the destruction and the ransacking of the Museum of Sudan, which happened now. I mean, it's been happening for the last 2 years of war.
When exactly did you respond to this?
Sorry?
When did you respond to this?
When the pictures came out, when the liberation of the capital, Khartoum, from the Janjaweed, the RSF, came out, and people saw images of the museum, and this was my only response to it. I didn't know what else to do, because culture has a lot to do with this war that we're having right now in Sudan, because people didn't meet. People didn't, most people that saw those destruction of those images of the museum, it was probably the first time they ever saw that museum. And that's the issue. If we don't meet, if we don't know our common history, how are we supposed to talk? Right? So, and this is what I'm trying to talk about in this cartoon. And this is also, again, about the war. It's called Short Story, and it's the Janjaweed, or the rebels that you see now with the brown turban on, killing one, and then the other person is has his hands up, and then when the army comes, the one that survived is going to oh, that's the person that killed them, and then he gets shot as well, because he's treated as a traitor, or how come you're alive? And this is one of the biggest things that are happening right now. Whenever an area is liberated, all the people that were there are accused of being supporters of the rebels. So it keeps going.
Could you tell us about how these images, these cartoons, are distributed?
I work online. I never worked in a newspaper before, because of that, because of censorship, because I always thought about how can I get to most people, right? Being where I'm from, how do I get to the most people? Because being from the global South as a whole, it's like watching the world talk about you all the time, because every one of us speaks 2 languages or 3 languages, right? And
except me.
The West.
Carry on.
The West looks at us and talks about us without our voice. So we're watching you talk about us all the time. So what I wanted to do is kind of have a response to that. This is what we think about what's going on, right? If that matters. It doesn't matter. But what we're trying to push for is that it becomes our own voice. So the internet kind of gave me that space, and I still jump from one social media platform to the other, until of course it gets shadow banned, or it gets bought by a billionaire or something.
There's no consistent platform that you use?
No, I use whatever people are in, because I don't have another choice.
Okay. Let me ask you another question. What is it about the cartoon, because it blends humor and visual metaphor, what is specific about that sort of cuts through desensitization?
I don't know if it cuts through desensitization, but what I want is, as I said, is just what is the best way to get to people. Yeah. And the cartoon is very simple, as you can see, and it's about the idea. And I can talk to an 8-year-old, but I can also talk to you, and we can have that conversation. And when I say I'm a political cartoonist, people smile. And that's a good entrance for someone like me. I'm a big black guy. Some people get, intimidated by that. And when I say I'm a political cartoonist, people are like, oh, And then this is when I start the conversation. And it's always easy to disseminate. All my work is under Creative Commons license, so it's easy to share and to use. And this is how it actually got into a lot of the walls of, graffitied all over the world. And I worked with a lot of amazing artists because it's just simple to do.
Well, and also, perhaps another point, we live in an age of very short attention spans, and people struggle to look at paintings in museums, but a cartoon, you get a hit within 2 seconds, and that, in our current culture, is a very effective way to put your message across, isn't it?
Yes, and that was actually one of the reasons, is because, even in our own culture, when I say I'm an artist, people look at me in a way that, like I'm being very, what's the word, selfish or something, But when I say I'm a political cartoonist, people know that I am talking about things that belong to them, that are from them. Yeah. And I'm not trying to sell things to, Europeans in the museum or whatever. No, I'm trying to talk about our own issues. And about your question, it's also about, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. What was the question again?
Well, I was just making the observation that in an age of very reduced attention spans, the cartoon is a very effective way of getting your message across.
Yes, but you know what the problem is now? Is that the news became cartoons. I don't know what to do anymore, because everything is just short. This is... Thank you. But it's this is the history of da-da-da-da in 1 minute, That's supposed to be my job. Like, that's what I'm supposed to do. The journalists are supposed to give a longer version of that, what happened, the nuance of that. So for me, I wrote an article maybe like a year and a half ago for Al Jazeera, talking about the title of the article is how I stopped being a cartoonist and became a troll. Because I feel like it's time for a conversation. Those images don't work anymore because I'm not getting through to people.
But these images make me smile and make people smile. The news doesn't.
If you see them, but how are you going to see them to make you smile? There's no way for this to get to you. There's no way for this to get to you. Artists, or what's called artists, the people like we see here, you'll go to museums, you'll go to art spaces, you know where to find them.
But let me just complete this little conversation. Do you feel this is effectively what you do, your work, is effectively making some kind of difference?
No. I don't think it could make, and I don't think anything can make a difference alone. I think this me and other people would need to make things together so for it to move on. Just like you said, we need to innovate. Everyone needs to do what they need to do. I'll do my cartoons, but journalists need to do their job.
Sure.
Politicians need to do their job. And with the freedom of expression and the freedom of speech, allowed to do that. And we're supposed to be allowed in spaces to talk about these things, right? For me, the minute people, know that I talk about politics or I do work in politics, they're drawn back. That doesn't sell. So you're not supposed to be in this place, right? So we don't get the same access if you're talking about socially engaged art. You don't. So that's the issue.
Okay. Nomi, why don't you take the little machine?
Yes.
Because among your many talents, you actually have an artistic sensibility of yourself. And I wanted to ask you about any specific moments in your career where you were responding in an artistic way, as it were, that has made a real difference in a war zone or a conflict zone. I think you have one special moment that you're particularly...
Yes, I have. Thank you for asking. I mean, the first time that I decided to put together an exhibition, an artistic exhibition, to relay the horror of war crimes that led to incitement, that led to war crimes, that led to genocide, was after the July 1995 Srebrenica massacre, which was actually...
Yeah, let's try and get the image up.
There's an image. Is that the first one? Go back.
Or you can...
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
We can start with that, if you like. So what I did was I took...
Why don't you show the family, if we've got that? Yeah,
that one. Okay,
great.
Sorry, we'll start that on. Okay, so what I did was I took some time off from my work at the United Nations, where I was working at the Secretary General's office. And went to Bosnia because I felt that by the time that the UN would get its wheels oiled and rolling, all the evidence of the mass graves would be gone. So I took leave without pay and had the contacts to get on a C-130 and found a place to stay with the family, which was, of course, how you learn about what's really going on. And I joined Gary Knight, a very renowned photographer who was on assignment for Newsweek. And we together found Hurrem Sulic, who's in the photo, and his wife. He was a survivor of Srebrenica. He actually survived the shooting in a mass grave. So basically when the 3,000 men were killed in that particular grave, and 2 of them survived after all the bullets, the rain of bullets, the silence that followed the rain of bullets. When he saw, because the blindfold wasn't put on him properly, so he actually could see what was going on, when he saw that the bulldozers had left, and when he saw that Ratko Mladic, the military commander of the Bosnian Serb forces, he himself with his small red car had left, then it was safe for him to try to climb over the bodies and eventually reach safety. He's also crippled, so there was another younger guy gentleman who helped him out. And of course it was days until they reached safety. So I interviewed him. I took this photo as well as many other photos, and I sent the evidence to the court, to what today is the International Criminal Court. At the time it was the International Court for the Crimes in the former Yugoslavia in The Hague. And I put together the testimony.
Sorry, we should show one or two of the other images.
Yes, I'm happy to show the other images. Hold on, let's see what else we have. So those are, so first there was the issue of getting to the mass graves, uncovering where the mass graves are. And then the question was how to identify, so there were forensic experts. The forensic experts are not my area of expertise. They could identify where the mass graves were, in part because people like Hurrem could direct them. But then there's the question of the exact location. These are frogs mating on human flesh. That's what this photo is. And that's how they identified it. I'm just sorry, oh no, I'll go back. Sorry, I need to see the other photographs. That is one of the forensic experts, sort of marking where he believes they're human bodies, again, based on the fora up on the grave, and those are the digging tools, because they will, of course, dig up for bodies, then try to match DNA. Those are flowers mating on human flesh. So I tried to make it artistic, and I also tried, as I am, as you said, a positive person, I ended up on a very positive note. As part of the interview, of course, I asked him how would he view justice? What would justice mean to him? What would he like to see the international community do? What kind of role, again, could anyone have? And he said interestingly, he said he has no anger, no bad feelings against those who pulled the trigger because they were manipulated by the leaders and the military commanders, but he would like to see the leaders of Serbia and the Bosnia Serb Republic and the military leaders tried in The Hague. And that was, so I put all that together, and then I concluded it was a 4-section exhibition. I concluded with the UN and NATO and sort of the role of all those who tried to get Bosnia to peace. Of course, this is exactly 30 years ago. We can do a retrospect. We're coming up to the 30-year anniversary of Bosnia, so now I'd like to do a 3D with a virtual reality and the voices of those who are still alive, and try to really bring it back to life in a more modern way so that the communication can be far deeper. One can really embed it in one's mind, heart.
Do you feel those images made an important contribution to the impact of the testimony?
Yes, I think so. I think that different people relate to, some people like myself mainly learn from rhetoric, other people like my mother learn mainly from reading, others from imagery who are not as literal. I think everyone takes something. But I think yesterday there was a wonderful workshop here by Ronen Berger. He asked everyone in the workshop to choose an image that is not conflictive, that is calm, and then first to through the practice he did, embed it in our minds to try to sort of deregulate, and then the second exercise to embed it in our soul. Sorry, not in our soul, in our body. And I thought that was extremely powerful. And for those who didn't manage to deregulate, he got us to put our hand up with how much stress we feel we have. He worked again and again until they found an image that worked for them. So yes, I think it's a really important way. Certainly, in my case as well, I use captions because I write, I'm a lawyer. The incitement that led to genocide, when I brought it to Israel, for example, in 1996, and to Palestine, I had the captions in English, Hebrew, and Arabic.
Sorry, we're actually running out of time, but I think a key point here to make in a very simple way is that art in this specific context has made a difference, hasn't it?
Made a huge difference. No one knew, really, literally, people, as you know, in their own countries, they relate to their own context.
And I suspect your cartoons
made a huge difference. I think it made a huge difference. I think the fact there was genocide due to incitement, due to brainwashing, that was my message. It can happen anywhere, it can happen here. That was my message.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We've run out of time, I'm afraid. No time for questions, but thank you. Thank you.